Greetings everyone. Welcome to the ongoing series Making of Contemporary India. In this series, today's topic would be Democracy at Work in India with special reference to backward class movement. There were different reasons that were important, that played a very important role behind various backward class movements as they emerged in India during colonial period. The activities of the Christian missionaries to win converts among lower castes and the various socio-religious reform movements among the Indians contributed to the growth of awareness among the marginalized sections of society against domination by the upper castes as well as the oppressive nature of the caste system. This led to emergence of various backward class movements in early 20th century. The British government lent support to these movements in order to weaken the freedom struggle. Some of the important backward class movements that emerged in early 20th century were the Dravidian movement, SNDP movement, Mahar movement, and according to scholars like M.S.A. Rao, these backward class movements were transformative in nature as they attacked several age-old notions and opened several new vistas for the marginalized sections of society. If we talk about the circumstances that were instrumental behind the creation of Dravidian movement, then one can say the influence of Christianity, Western education, the non-Brahmin movement that emerged in the Madras Presidency region developed a new awareness, as a result of which resentment started emerging among the marginalized sections against the domination by the upper castes, both in professions as well as in society, in politics, and even in the Congress party. So overall, there was a disillusionment that finally took shape. They believed that if they had to make successful careers, then the domination of Brahmins in professional and political field had to be first questioned, it had to be overthrown, only then a change could come about in their lives. So by 1914, this conflict between the emerging non-Brahmin urban middle class and the establishment of mostly Brahmin middle class and upper class took a sharp turn. The non-Brahmin caste united themselves and the non-Brahmin manifesto came to be published in 1916, and this was followed by the formation of South Indian Association as early as 1917. Arrival of Periyar played a very important role in this overall process of mobilization. After the Montague-Chelmsford reforms, South Indian Association was converted into Justice Party to counter the rising political influence of Congress. However, Justice Party was again a party of urban educated professional middle class who were rather elite in nature, and therefore they failed to create a mass base for themselves. And after that, the self-respect movement was founded in 1925 by E.V. Ramaswamy, popularly known as Periyar. The self-respect movement was largely based on the Dravidian ideology to save the non-Brahmins from the tyranny of Brahmins who were considered as Aryans. The self-respect movement aimed at removing the control of the upper castes from the socio-political levels and also sought to wean people away from the Puranic ritualistic Hinduism, which necessitated the existence of Brahmin priests. So this was a very revolutionary kind of a thinking, where the very existence of Brahmin priests during ceremonies was being questioned. Also important development was the merger of two organizations and creation of Dravid Kazhagam. And soon the upper castes came to be looked at as the symbol of all exploitation, and gradually this movement succeeded. It appealed to the masses, and soon a huge mass following became a reality for the movement. And it was in 1944 that the Self-Respect Movement and Justice Party were merged to form Dravida Kazhagam, headed by Periyar. It adopted a militant mass agitational strategy and also advocated an egalitarian ideology, condemning largely the caste system and all the evil practices, the derogatory practices that were associated with the age-old caste system. Next important development that one can talk about is the formation of DMK, Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam. In 1949, it was largely as a result of difference between Periyar and C.N. Annadurai, who largely led the younger section in Dravida Kazhagam, that there was a split, and this resulted in formation of DMK. The majority of the rank and file of DK also joined DMK. Initially, the support base of DMK largely consisted of lower middle class students and castes like Nadars, Marwars and Adi Dravidians, and most of them also were unemployed youth. Cinema became a very effective media that was used by DMK to propagate its ideology and to further win a mass base. A consequence of DMK was the decline in the domination of Brahmins in Tamil Nadu and a new sense of freedom that came to be enjoyed by the lower castes. However, later on, as DMK tried to capture power, it gradually abandoned its reformist zeal and even the demand for creation of a separate Dravidian Nadu, and acquired a character of one of the mainstream political parties with a rational support base. A very important role in Dravidian movement was played by Ayothi Dasa Pandithar. The basic components of Dalit consciousness that had started developing from late 19th century, and the process continued in early 20th century in South India. The features of Dalit consciousness that was represented by Dalit thinkers like Ayothi Dasa Pandithar, who existed from 1845 to 1914, became very popular among the depressed classes. His writings became very popular, and they were published rather recently in 2 volumes in 1999 and the 3rd volume in 2003. Pandithar lived at a time prior to Ambedkar, and it seems that he has come to be associated with Dalit consciousness and revival of Buddhism even much earlier than Ambedkar. So therefore, he played a very important role in creating a distinct identity for the marginalized sections of society. He challenged the existing view that the Justice Party of South Indian non-Brahmins was the pioneer movement in popularizing the themes of anti-Brahmanism. So we see that it was Ayothi Dasa Pandithar which can equally be regarded as the harbinger of this change and popularizing the theme of atheism, critiquing evil practices associated with Hinduism and caste system. The way he worked upon building of Dalit consciousness in Tamil context in the wake of 20th century would also help us in understanding as to how pertinent it is to take note of appearance of Marxist ideology in Tamil region because of M. Singaravelu, who also is celebrated as the first communist of South India. He started his political career along with Pandithar and participated in the Buddhist revivalism in South India and also entered into certain debates with Ayodhidasa to get evolved into a communist ideology, and he participated in the round table conference also along with B.R. Ambedkar. Now, moving on to the next important backward class movement, that is SNDP movement, which began under Sri Narayan Dharam Paripalanam. The movement came to be known as SNDP movement. The untouchable Ezhavas or Iravas of Kerala, who were clustered around the religious leader Sri Narayan Guru, who existed from 1855 to 1928, formed the SNDPY in 1902. And the major role that this organization played in was in organizing temple entry rights movements. As you can see, this great leader in this visual, Sri Narayan Guru. This movement was largely based on the idea of reinterpretation of Hindu religion and also some kind of self-determination, creation of a new identity. And this was particularly popular among the toddy tappers of Kerala, who were known as Ezhavas. If we look at the historical background, then until 1935, the Ezhavas belonged to the scheduled caste category. They were considered to be unapproachable by the other castes as their touch was considered to be polluting. Ezhavas, who constituted around 26% of Kerala's total population, suffered from several religious, political and economic disabilities. By the turn of the century, however, a charismatic leader, Sri Narayan Guru Swami, gave them not only a new religion of one God and one caste, but also transformed their outlook towards themselves as well as their lifestyles. He established a set of religious institutions which were parallel to those of Brahmanical Hinduism. This helped Ezhavas not only attain self-respect but also to protest against religious, economic, educational as well as political domination of the upper castes. There were several causes that were instrumental behind this movement. Traditionally, Ezhavas were an untouchable caste of toddy trappers, and they were supposed to stay away from the Nambudiri Brahmins. They were denied access to temples or to the bathing tanks, and their women were not allowed to cover their upper body. Neither they were allowed to wear any footwear, nor they could build proper houses. By the later part of 19th century, with the spread of modern humanistic and secular ideas and also spread of egalitarianism through Christianity, Ezhavas came to view their situation as one of exploitation and started questioning their given situation. So, it was gradually under the leadership of Sri Narayan Guru that they started rejecting Brahmanical domination and also opted for a new interpretation of religion. They adopted the strategy of withdrawal as well as self-organization. Their ideology was largely based on the principle of self-respect, honor and worthiness of each and every individual, irrespective of their caste. It was definitely an ideology of protest against the Brahmanical value system of hierarchy and pollution. So, S.N. Guru established a parallel source of legitimacy by establishing new institutions like temples, priests, monks, monasteries, etc. Later on, it was T.V. Madhavan who led the Vaikom Temple Road Entry movement in 1927, in which he was greatly encouraged by Mahatma Gandhi also. And after the 2 years of continuous satyagraha, the Izhawas were granted the right to use the road which ran near the Vaikom temple, which earlier had been monopolized by the upper castes. Now, this was definitely a historic victory for them against the orthodox ideas of purity and pollution. And gradually the followers started working towards attaining more rights in the field of religion, education, employment and politics. SNDP movement represented one of the most successful attempts of the downtrodden castes to change the traditional balance of power, besides improving their own positions. This also indicated that one could remain within the fold of Hinduism, but at the same time counter the stigma of untouchability that was attached. So, this definitely was a very empowering movement, especially among Izhawa tribes. The movement further motivated them to take to modern education, to become part of modern occupational structure, professions, which definitely brought about greater prestige and wealth. The Dravidianist challenge to caste domination did not merely displace the Brahmins, but the movement also gave rise to a more thoroughgoing idea of humanism, egalitarianism that successfully penetrated society, especially because this was a grassroots movement and it was based on the idea of a new common sense, rationality, etc. And so therefore, one cannot really consider Dravidianism as a vehicle for power brokers of an emergent petite bourgeoisie against an established urban professional class, something that has been done by some Cambridge scholars. Rather, the movement can very well be considered as being rooted in humanist ideology, in reformist ideology. So, Dravidianist politics did not merely mobilize populous dominant backward castes at the expense of Dalits by supporting landholders and small town businessmen, but had a much wider scope which needs to be further researched. New sections of Tamil society came to be mobilized as DMK promoted democratic decision making structures within its organizations. As a result of all these changes, older political elites came to be displaced by the new entrants who in the beginning were not elite, but gradually they also became. This also countered overwhelming Brahmin preponderance in the new urban professions of law and government, and therefore now it was the other castes also which increasingly started getting an entry in new institutions of higher education, in several urban professions of law and government. Now, the next important movement that one can talk about is Mahar movement. Various democratic struggles that took place under B.R. Ambedkar's leadership in colonial India have played a very important role. Most of these struggles emerged in 1920s and 1930s. However, the beginning had been made from mid-19th century itself with the introduction of new education, English based education, and also with the opening up of educational institutions for all castes irrespective of their social status. The 1920s and 30s were radical years in Ambedkar's movement, as has been remarked by Gail Omwet. Ambedkar started his struggle from Mahad Satyagraha in 1927, which was followed by the Kalaram temple entry movement that happened in 1930. A vibrant peasant and workers movement emerged under his leadership. Though these struggles took place in Marathi-speaking areas, their effect, however, was to be felt nationwide. It became the beginning of the liberation era to fight against caste class exploitation. These struggles established Ambedkar as a national leader and also as a harbinger of democratic values. So, in 1927, Ambedkar organized the Mahad Conference and it was in March 1927 which stipulated that the untouchables were authorized to use wells, dharmshalas, schools, courts, administrative offices and public dispensaries. He led a procession of conference delegates to Chawar Tank. The leaders of the procession then stopped and drank water, and attempting some kind of a symbolic fulfillment of the law that had been passed by the colonial state. The Mahad Tank Satyagraha illustrates a very important role that mass movement and mass action under the able leadership of Ambedkar was going to play. And Gail Omwet has described this event as the beginning of Dalit liberation struggle. According to Eleanor Zilliot, the Mahad Satyagraha failed to achieve its specific purpose, but was successful as a rallying point for the internal reform of the depressed classes, the public expression of their grievances, as well as the stimulation of a sense of unity, identity, and also how through a united effort a change could be initiated in society. Mahads were hereditary village servants and they were considered as polluting, and so they, while they played very important role as village servants, carriers of dead animals, husbandmen, messengers, laborers, scavengers, sellers of firewood, cow dung, etc. However, their role was not considered as respectful. The chief source of their income was the yearly grain allowance or baluta. They had 52 village duties, and these duties carried with them a relatively substantial watan right or claim to some portion of the village land in return for their performance. In 1920s, Ambedkar initiated his campaign against the Mahar Watan, a practice which was continued under the British rule. So, Ambedkar marked out the social servitude of untouchables that had been inbuilt in Baluta relations. The anti-Mahar Watan movement and the anti-Khoti movement were significant struggles to democratize the rural structure away from the caste feudal society. Thank you.